Please help me welcome Obi.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. And now, well, someone else who doesn't need an introduction, because she's already had an introduction just a few minutes ago, is none other than our favorite, Charlene Fadirepo. Woo! So,
Testing.
working? Maybe press the button.
Testing, testing. Hello, everyone, again.
Okay.
Good to be here again.
So, Charlene, you've been busy again.
Have.
I mean, so you are prolific. You are active. You've been active for years with advocacy, educating policymakers in the US, working with Bitcoin, I won't reveal what he said.
Oh boy.
But, so working with policymakers in the US, working with Bitcoin, with women in Bitcoin, with Satoshi Sisters Circle, and many other things. One of the things you've just done is release a new book. It's incredibly interesting. It's very relevant to everything that's been discussed up until now. I was actually just joking with you earlier, saying that all of this, the last talks have effectively been a lead up to this book and this panel right now. And it's your third book now, actually.
It is my third book.
And I think it's really interesting for everybody to understand and go through this book. But before we do that, something that Charlene doesn't really do a lot of is actually talk about herself. And you'll understand why when we talk about the book. So I thought it made sense to just give a bit of your story, your background, before we talk about other people's stories.
Awesome. So, again, my name is Charlene Fadirepo. I'm a Bitcoin banker, activist, and advocate. I run a company called Mango Digital Strategies. We help banks future-proof their growth through Bitcoin. And I am the author of the Bitcoin Leap. And my Bitcoin story is really interesting. So I came to Bitcoin with about 15 years of Big Four management consulting experience. I also worked at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, so I'm a former regulator. So I come to Bitcoin with a very focused fintech and banking and finance lens. But I joined Bitcoin at about 2020, and at the time, I was running a wealth tech startup. So I was really into financial education, and we were training Black American women investors how to get smarter about their money. And I was getting questions from my clients about Bitcoin. Now, these were women who did not have a lot of financial education, and they were low to moderate income. And I thought that was very interesting. Around that same time, my husband, who is Nigerian, said to me, "You should check out this Bitcoin thing." And, you know, if you guys remember 2020, it was a time where the world stood still. You took the time to pay attention, and I did. I spent about 3 months researching Bitcoin. I jumped on Clubhouse, found this wonderful community called the Black Bitcoin Billionaires. Shout out to Lamar, CJ, Justin, Fred Barber. Jumped online and just was blown away by this incredible community. That's where I cut my teeth in Bitcoin. I learned how to talk about Bitcoin. I learned how to make the case. And once I understood Bitcoin as a tool for sound money, something clicked, because I remember an experience that I had in 2015. So my family, we spent
before you found out about Bitcoin. This experience.
Before, yeah. So, you know, this idea of Bitcoin as sound money reminded me of this 2015 experience. We were in Lagos. I was shopping. As you can see, I like to shop. We were in Balogun Market, which is one of the largest open-air markets in West Africa. I had my money. And the first thing we had to do, we couldn't go to the bank. And as a banker, I was like, what is this? So we had to drive around Balogun Market to find our house a guy. And our Hausa guy was going to help us change our money. So of course,
changer.
Exactly. So Hausa, of course, is one of the largest ethnic groups in Nigeria. So that took 30 minutes, and I was annoyed about that. I went shopping, and in that 2-week vacation period, the value of the Naira in my pocket dropped. And for me, that was just a shock. And so again, I was shopping for artwork and clothes, but I could only imagine how painful that would have been if I was trying to put food on my table, if I was trying to buy shoes for my children, or if I was trying to pay for health care for my family. And, that experience clicked for me, and it said to me that, so this Bitcoin thing it's interesting and cool for the West, but in Africa, it's going to change the world. And after I had that realization, I pivoted and said, I'm going to put all of my effort, everything I know about banking, into really focusing on making sure Bitcoin can be a success in Africa.
And that's well, possible.
Thanks.
I think it was around that time when you started to double down.
I did. Yep.
I think it was around that time when you started to double down and really focus on how Bitcoin can empower Africa. That's when I first started to really start to talk to you. But you are someone who has had the benefit of seeing, partly because of your familial relations, your husband and so on, and extended family, and also your own upbringing and experience, to see two worlds, the West and Africa. How would you say, in your mind, there's the difference in terms of how people view and how we use and interact with Bitcoin in these two different realities?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about this idea of narratives, this whole conference, and I think this idea of narratives is really important. So if you think of the traditional narrative for Bitcoin in the West, it is a investment-focused store of value narrative, and we say things like "stay humble and stack sats," right? So again, very, very Western-centric. I always thought that was tone deaf because we know that Bitcoin is for the world and not the West. And if you think about the African perspective, it's a much broader use case. In Africa, I think what's more important, you say things like, well, what's more effective is you build, you earn, you learn in sats. And this speaks to a more complex use case for Bitcoin. So certainly in Africa, you have the use case where you're focusing on the store of value. But more importantly, you're looking at the use case where this is a medium of exchange where you can transfer inflation-resistant value from one country to another. And to me, that is just the most powerful use case for Bitcoin. And what does that look like? It looks like cross-border payments. It looks like remittances from the US to Nigeria. It looks like exporter-importers being able to actually purchase things in Bitcoin because, as we heard earlier, in many countries like Nigeria, there's restrictions on capital flows, restrictions on dollars. And so, you just see Bitcoin is just opening up a lot of economic channels that have been closed because of history.
So, so the book, you mentioned the name, but the book is The Bitcoin Leap.
Yep.
And it talks about how Bitcoin is transforming Africa. And also I think it talks about how Africa indirectly is transforming Bitcoin. But what's really interesting about it, and you mentioned it here, and it's been talked about all the way through, is that you don't just talk about what Bitcoin is and how it works and about yourself, but you spend a lot of time talking through and describing the stories of various people in the African space who are working on Bitcoin, and you describe their struggles and their stories, and you bring them to life. And that, I think, is what makes it really unique. In fact, so unique that when it was launched, it's already, only recently launched, it's already in the Amazon top 100 books for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency worldwide. So clearly it's saying something different and unique and really powerful. And I want to ask you two questions related to this. One is, why are you so focused on telling people's stories? What makes you most focused on that and bring them to life? And then I want to get into some examples of stories. But first of all, just what drives you to do that?
Well, I'll take a step back and just say that this book is really a celebration of African innovation or Bitcoin innovation in Africa. Sometimes the idea of innovation is only reserved for certain countries. It's only reserved for certain people. And the more time I've spent in Bitcoin, the incredible genius that is right here on this continent is really incredible. So I also think that there are a lot of Bitcoin books that are out there, but there's no Bitcoin book that centers the African Bitcoin story until now. And that's really important. And it's important to tell everyone's story because we want everyone in this room to see themselves in the Bitcoin space. You've heard throughout this entire conference that it's about building, it's about creating, it's about finding your place in the Bitcoin space. If all of the examples and all of the success stories are for people that are far, far away from you, then you might come away with this idea that this thing is not for you, that you're not ready, that you don't have the tools, that you don't have the ideas. And that is absolutely not the case. What was so apparent for me in this book was that we have everything that we need to be successful in this Bitcoin ecosystem. And, I think telling these entrepreneurial stories will allow this next generation of builders to feel very confident and affirmed in their ability to lead the change in terms of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think 100% agree. I think role models help. I remember when Obama became president, and just every time I walk down the streets and I see another black person, we just nod at each other knowing it's possible, guys, it's possible.
It can happen.
And when you hear these stories and you know what the struggles that some of these amazing people have gone through and the way you bring them to life, it just is going to, for each story, there's going to be 100, 1,000 people, men and women, boys and girls who are going to be inspired to go further, go faster. So give us, but let's make this real. Give us some examples.
So I guess the first theme is that there are unique. Africa has some very unique problems, and there are African innovators on the ground solving them. So in the book, you'll meet someone that you heard on stage yesterday, Katatso Nako, who is the pioneer of Manchankura. So he is solving for internet poverty in Africa. Right now, internet penetration in Africa is 43%. He's allowing people to buy Bitcoin without internet service, right? A really unique problem, African problem, and he created a solution. So you'll meet him. In the book, you'll meet Sudan Hoddle, who is actually an emergency, thank you. Sudan Hoddle is an emergency medicine doctor. He lives in Europe, but he started this incredible Telegram group in Sudan. And so this Telegram group was originally designed to help Sudanese businessmen do export import. But in early January 2021, when Sudan was going through economic crises, he was able to use this Telegram group to provide humanitarian aid in Sudan. So you'll learn about Sudan Hoddle. I also have to shout out Marcel Lorraine, who's the founder of Bitcoin Data, who is doing incredible work to support women in Kenya. I don't know if there are datas in the room. And all over the country. So again, we didn't have to go anywhere. These folks are not doing this because a government told them so. They're not doing it because there was a foreign body that flew in and say, hey, you should pay attention. They're doing it because they're recognizing that there's some unique problems on the ground, and they're creating solutions to fix those problems. And there are many, many stories like that, from East to West Africa, from North to South Africa.
So I've been asked to make this a little bit shorter because I would love us to continue, but let's round it up. What are the next steps for you? What are the next steps for the Bitcoin Leap?
So the next steps for the Bitcoin Leap, it is my hope and dream to take this book and to share it with every college campus, both in Africa and the United States. And so I'm embarking on a journey to connect with African universities and universities in the United States, because like we said before, I really need the next generation of builders to see themselves in the Bitcoin space. I need them to know about the global utility of Bitcoin. I need them to see that there are people building on-ramps and off-ramps that are from Kenya, from Ghana, from Nigeria, and I need them to take charge and find their place, because this thing is moving fast and we don't have a lot of time. So I look forward to connecting with universities, and if there's anyone in this room, and I've talked to some people that can help me forge partnerships with universities in Africa and also in the United States, I would welcome a connection, because I think that's next. I would love for this, I'm excited about contributing this book to the canon of Bitcoin literature, and it's my opinion that Bitcoin and Africa, or Africa, presents the most compelling use case for Bitcoin that exists. So I think this is where you start. When you're teaching Bitcoin, you start with Africa, and then you talk about all the other use cases. Because when you start with Africa and you explain the global utility, people get it. They don't do Bitcoin because it's cool. They do Bitcoin because it is solving very important problems on the continent.
Thank you very much. Bitcoin lead.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you guys. Oh, sorry. Thanks.